What if the cheese in your fridge right now was never legally cheese? Not an opinion, not a food blog. The FDA has a classification system, and 2 out of 3 cheese brands on a standard grocery shelf don't make the cut. I went through Bloomberg lab tests, class action lawsuits, and federal criminal prosecution files to build this list. One brand sold fake Parmesan for 30 years. Their president pleaded guilty to federal charges. The fine was $5,000. 8 brands to avoid, 4 that are genuinely real. Here's number 8. Number 8, Laughing Cow. This is the one in every lunchbox. Those little foil-wrapped wedges have been around since 1921 when the brand launched in France. Parents peel back the red foil, hand one to their kid, and don't think twice. The cow is cheerful. The name says cheese. Into the cart it goes. Here's what the FDA says about that. Laughing Cow is classified as a pasteurized processed cheese spread. That's not a technicality buried somewhere in fine print. It's a legal determination about what's actually inside the package. To carry that classification, a product must contain at least 51% real cheese by weight. What fills the rest? Emulsifying salts, milk protein concentrate, whey, water, and stabilizers. The actual process of making cheese, introducing cultures to fresh milk, coagulating it, separating curds from whey, pressing it into shape. None of that happens here. What happens instead is that pre-made cheese gets blended with additives inside a heated industrial mixing tank until it reaches that smooth, scoopable texture you recognize from the packaging. Here's the part that gets me. They're not hiding it. Flip the package and the words cheese spread appear right there in small print beneath the cartoon cow. But parents grabbing this in the dairy aisle aren't reading the back panel. They see the big word cheese on the front and move on. You're not buying cheese. You're buying something that borrowed cheese's name and built a brand around it. That's number 8. And honestly, it's the most forgivable entry on this list. The next one involves a label claim that an independent lab tested and found to be simply untrue. Number 7. Great Value Grated Parmesan, Walmart's store brand. The container says 100% grated Parmesan cheese right on the front in clear print. When a label says 100%, most shoppers take that literally. You'd be wrong too. In 2016, Bloomberg News sent samples of store-brand grated Parmesan to an independent laboratory. Great Value came back at close to 8% cellulose. Cellulose is a plant fiber derived from wood pulp. The FDA accepts it as an anti-caking agent at between 2 and 4% of the total product. Great Value was running at nearly double that ceiling. Here's what that means. When you're standing over a pot of pasta, shake that container over your food, and close to 1 in every 12 spoonfuls landing on your plate is not cheese. It's plant fiber filler. And it's not just that one Bloomberg test. A subsidiary of Dairy Farmers of America ran analysis across 28 brands of grated Parmesan and found that only 1 in 3 labels was accurate about protein content. When the protein numbers on a label don't match what a lab finds inside the container, cheaper non-cheese ingredients are usually filling that gap. The label said 100%. The lab said otherwise. That difference is what you're paying for every time you buy this. The next brand started as something genuinely real. Then the formula quietly changed and nobody told the people buying it. You already know what not to buy. The harder part is figuring out what's actually worth putting in your cart. We spend months comparing hundreds of products, finding better picks and smarter swaps, and put everything into one shopping guide. It's linked below. Number 6. Cheese Whiz. Kraft introduced this in 1952. And here's the part that surprises most people. The original version actually contained meaningful amounts of real cheese. Dean Southworth was one of the food scientists who helped develop that original formula. In 2001, nearly 50 years later, he picked up a jar from his local grocery store, opened it, tasted it, and told journalist Michael Moss it tasted like axle grease. When he checked the ingredient list, cheese wasn't on it anywhere. 27 ingredients were listed. Not one of them was cheese. When a Kraft spokeswoman was later pressed on this by the National Post, she acknowledged the product does still contain some real cheese. But when journalists pushed for the actual amount, she declined to give a number. The company's explanation was that cheese doesn't appear as a standalone ingredient because its component parts, things like milk and cheese culture, are listed individually instead. So, what's actually in there? The first ingredient is whey, the liquid byproduct left over after milk has been curdled during real cheese making. Then comes canola oil, maltodextrin, milk protein concentrate, modified food starch, and sodium alginate. A single 2 tablespoon serving delivers close to 20% of your daily sodium limit. The FDA classifies Cheez Whiz as a processed cheese product. In federal food law, that phrase formally means this doesn't meet the legal definition of cheese. A product that launched with real cheese in 1952 had cheese quietly removed from its own ingredient list somewhere along the way. That's worth knowing before you buy it. Number 5. Borden American Singles. Borden has been a name in American dairy since 1857, the year Gail Borden received his patent for condensed milk. More than 160 years of history. That kind of legacy doesn't stay on a shelf by accident. It gets built into every logo, every label, every purchase made by a shopper who grew up trusting that name. But flip the package over, and you'll find 3 separate thickening gums on the ingredient list. Xanthan gum, locust bean gum, garum. Real cheese doesn't need gums to hold its shape. The natural proteins in milk bond and firm up during the aging process. That's what gives aged cheese its structure. When a product needs multiple industrial gums to maintain a slice shape, it's because that natural protein structure isn't sufficiently there to do the job on its own. The label calls these a reduced-fat pasteurized prepared cheese product. Parse that carefully. It didn't qualify as cheese. It didn't qualify as cheese food. It sits at the lowest tier on the FDA's classification scale for anything still allowed to use cheese-adjacent language on the front of the package. Then there's the sodium. One slice contains roughly 350 milligrams, around 15% of the daily recommended limit. 2 slices on a sandwich, and you're already at 30% of your daily sodium budget before you've added a condiment, a spread, or anything else. Borden spent over 160 years building credibility on real dairy. These slices trade on that name without living up to what it used to mean. The next one actually starts with a legitimate invention, which makes what happened to it even stranger. If this investigation is helping you shop smarter, a quick like takes 1 second and helps more people find it. Number 4. Velveeta. This one genuinely starts well. In 1918, a Swiss immigrant named Emile Frey was working at the Monroe Cheese Company in New York. He found a way to take broken and misshapen cheese wheels, the ones that couldn't be sold whole, and process them into something smooth and consistent. That original Velveeta was real cheese, real enough that in the 1930s, the American Medical Association gave it a formal seal of approval. That product no longer exists. In 2002, the FDA sent Kraft, which now owns Velveeta, a formal warning letter. The letter instructed the company to stop calling Velveeta a cheese spread because it no longer met the legal standard for that term. Kraft's response was to change the label to pasteurized prepared cheese product. Here's exactly why that phrase matters. Pasteurized prepared cheese product carries no FDA standard of identity. There is no legal definition for what those 4 words mean when combined. It's a label that exists specifically because the product couldn't legally call itself cheese, cheese food, or cheese spread. So the company created new language to fill the gap. Today, depending on the variety, the first ingredient on a Velveeta package isn't milk and it isn't cheese, it's whey. Then comes canola oil, modified food starch, sodium citrate, gelatin, and sorbic acid. A single serving contains over 400 milligrams of sodium. And here's the part most shoppers grabbing a block of Vita for a dip don't know. That FDA warning letter happened. The label changed because the government forced it to. The product that once had a medical association's endorsement now carries a classification the FDA essentially required as a last resort. That's a significant distance to travel. And the next 2 names have traveled a similar road, except most people still don't realize it, because those brands feel like institutions. Number 3. Kraft Singles. James L. Kraft patented processed cheese in 1916. He built an entire category from scratch, and the yellow wrapper with his name on it became one of the most recognized food packages in American history. That recognition does serious work at the shelf. Shoppers see Kraft, they see cheese, and the decision is made before they've read a single word on the label. But every package of Kraft Singles sold today carries the label pasteurized prepared cheese product. That's not a choice Kraft made. The FDA mandates it because Kraft Singles contain less than 51% actual cheese by weight. Here's how the classification system works. Above 51% cheese, a product qualifies as pasteurized processed cheese. Drop below that and it becomes cheese food. Drop further and it becomes cheese product. Kraft singles sit in that bottom tier and have for years. What fills the ingredient list beyond whatever cheese is present? Whey, milk protein concentrate, modified food starch, sodium phosphate, and a collection of additives that stretches close to 20 ingredients total. The EWG flags calcium phosphate and sodium phosphates in this formula as additives of moderate concern. Now, consider the scale of this. According to statistic consumer surveys, Kraft singles rank among the most purchased cheese-labeled products in the entire country. Year after year, millions of American households pull these off the shelf, assuming they're buying cheese. They see the familiar yellow wrapper, they see the Kraft name, and it goes in the cart. Almost none of them have read the classification on the back. Almost none of them know what that label legally means. The brand communicates trust. The product no longer earns. And that gap runs across tens of millions of households every single week. The next one has been on American kitchen tables for generations. Most people grew up with it next to the salt and pepper. Nobody thought to question it until Bloomberg sent it to a lab. Number 2. Kraft Grated Parmesan. The green can. It's been a kitchen staple for decades. Generations of people shaking it over pasta without a second thought. It's one of those products that just feels like it's always been there, which is exactly why nobody asked what was actually inside it. Then Bloomberg ran the tests. Kraft's Grated Parmesan came back at just under 4% cellulose, right at the upper edge of the FDA's accepted range of 2 to 4%. Technically within bounds, but cellulose is only part of the picture. In 2016, an Illinois woman filed a class action lawsuit against Kraft Heinz in federal court. The central allegation, the label reading 100% grated Parmesan cheese, was deceptive because the product contains cellulose, potassium sorbate, and other non-cheese ingredients. Parallel lawsuits followed in New York, Missouri, and California. Kraft's position was that cellulose is FDA approved and their levels fall within acceptable limits. A federal judge dismissed the central claim in 2018, ruling that a reasonable consumer would not be misled by the label. Set the legal outcome aside and look at what the facts actually say. Real Paramio Riano, the cheese this product is modeled after, contains 3 ingredients: milk, salt, rennet. That list hasn't changed in centuries. What's inside the green can contains fillers, preservatives, and anti-caking agents alongside whatever cheese is present. The label says 100% Parmesan. A federal judge ruled consumers wouldn't be misled by that claim. You can decide what to make of that yourself, because number 1 is not a labeling dispute. Number 1 is not a classification technicality. Number 1 is a federal crime, and it ran for 30 years before anyone stopped it. We're about to get to the entry that ended in a federal guilty plea. If you've made it this far, you already know more about cheese labels than most people ever will. Number 1. Castle cheese. Castle cheese was based in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. For nearly 30 years, they supplied grated Parmesan to some of the largest retail grocery chains in the United States. Their products reached Target stores under the Market Pantry private label. They distributed through Associated Wholesale Grocers, a network serving over 3,000 retail locations across 30 states. Every single container said 100% grated Parmesan cheese. The FDA launched its investigation in 2012 after a former plant manager, someone who had recently been fired, called regulators with a tip. When investigators got inside the facility, what they found was that Castle's product labeled as pure Parmesan contained no Parmesan cheese whatsoever. Not a reduced amount, not a technical shortfall on a cellulose test. Zero. What was actually inside those containers was a mixture of Swiss, mozzarella, white cheddar, Havarti, and cellulose filler. All of it sold under a label that promised nothing but Parmesan, distributed to 3,000 stores across 30 states. Castle had been operating this way since the early 1980s. By 2013, the company was generating approximately $19 million in annual sales. For 3 decades, millions of Americans were shaking that container over their pasta and calling it Parmesan. Not a grain of it was. The company's president, Michelle Murder, pleaded guilty to federal charges of introducing misbranded and adulterated food into interstate commerce. She received 3 years of probation and a $5,000 fine. Combined restitution from the companies involved reached $1 million before Castle filed for bankruptcy. 30 years, $19 million a year, a federal guilty plea, a $5,000 fine. That is where the cheese industry's accountability currently stands. Sit with that for a moment, because the contrast with what comes next is significant. Now you know what to avoid. Here's the other side of this investigation. These 4 brands face the same ingredient options, the same cost pressures, and the same market incentives as every brand on that list, and they made entirely different decisions. Short lists, real milk, honest labels. Here's what actually passed. Best option number 4, Sargenau. A family-owned company out of Plymouth, Wisconsin, operating since 1953. They were the first company in America to sell prepackaged, sliced, and shredded natural cheese. That distinction matters because the word natural is doing real work here, not decorative work. Pick up a package of Sorrento cheddar and read the back. Pasteurized milk, cheese culture, salt, enzymes, and annatto for color. 5 ingredients. Every one of them belongs in cheese. No gums, no protein concentrates, no modified starches, no stabilizers of any kind. One thing worth knowing, Sorrento does use powdered cellulose as an anti-caking agent in some shredded varieties. That's a fair thing to flag, but their block and slice products are as clean as you'll find at a standard grocery store. In 2025, Sargento launched a natural American cheese slice with only 5 ingredients. Every competing American-style slice on the shelf typically lists 9 or more. Emulsifiers, stabilizers, milk protein concentrates. It reportedly took the company over a decade of internal research to produce an American-style cheese that melts correctly without any of those additives. Good Housekeeping recognized it with a 2026 Kitchen Award. 3 generations of the same family, 70 years. The ingredient list hasn't grown. That's not an accident. It's a decision they've made consistently, and the label proves it every time. Best option number 3, Belgioso. In 1979, an Italian cheesemaker named Arroyo moved his family from Italy to Wisconsin, bringing 2 master cheesemakers with him. His great-grandfather had founded a cheese company in Italy generations earlier. Arroyo chose Wisconsin specifically because the dairy farms there produced milk he considered unmatched anywhere else in the world. Today, Belgioso operates 7 facilities around Denmark and Pulaski, Wisconsin. Every product starts with fresh local milk collected daily from nearby farms, their fresh mozzarella ingredient list, pasteurized milk, vinegar, enzymes, and salt. 4 items. Their Parmesan wheels age a minimum of 10 months on wooden shelves in climate-controlled caves, turned by hand by the same cheesemakers who've been doing it for decades. In 1990, Belgioso became the first American company to produce authentic mascarpone. They now supply roughly 70% of all mascarpones sold in the United States. The Paragano Reggiano Consortium in Italy has estimated the global counterfeit Parmesan market at over $2 billion annually. Belgioso isn't participating in any version of that market. Real milk, real process, short ingredient list for over 45 years. After everything on that avoid list, 4 ingredients and 45 years of the same process is exactly what real cheese is supposed to look like. Best option number 2, Cabot Creamery, a farmer-owned cooperative based in Vermont, operating since 1919. Farmer-owned isn't a branding phrase here, it's a legal ownership structure. Over 800 farm families across New England and New York are actual members of the cooperative. The people making decisions about what goes into the product are the same people whose cows produce the milk. Pick up a block of Cabot Vermont Sharp Cheddar, pasteurized milk, cheese cultures, salt and enzymes, 4 ingredients, no fillers, no gums, no protein concentrates, no modified starches. That's the complete list. The cooperative structure matters for a reason that goes beyond feel-good branding. When a company answers to outside shareholders, every product decision carries cost pressure. Cheaper ingredients mean better margins, and that pressure never stops. When the person producing the milk is also a co-owner of the company selling the cheese, that dynamic changes completely. High quality stays honest, because the people with the most to lose are the ones whose names are attached to the product. Cabot's seriously sharp cheddar has won more awards at national and international cheese competitions than you'd expect from a regional Vermont cooperative. The flavor comes from proper aging, not from additives engineered to simulate it. 800 farm families, 4 ingredients, 105 years without cutting corners. That's a different kind of accountability than anything on the avoid list. Best option number 1, Tillamook. Founded in 1909 by a group of dairy farmers in Tealeoc County, Oregon, another farmer-owned cooperative. Over 115 years of making real cheese. But here's what separates Tillamook from every other brand in this investigation, including the good ones on this list. They let you watch. Their creamery is open for public tours. Walk in off the street and stand at a glass window. Watch the milk arrive. Watch the cultures go in. Watch the curds form. Watch the pressing. A company willing to let complete strangers observe its full production process in real time has nothing to conceal from anyone. That kind of transparency isn't a marketing decision. It's a statement about what's in the building. Tillamook cheddar ingredient list. Milk, salt, cultures, enzymes, and annat for color when used. That's everything. No fillers, no stabilizers, no thickening agents, nothing on that label that doesn't belong in cheese. Their cheddar ages from 60 days to over 2 years, and every batch is tested before it ships. Unlike brands that source milk from wherever it's cheapest on a given week, Tillamook uses exclusively the milk from its own member farms in the Pacific Northwest, arriving at the creamery within hours of milking. That's the standard that existed before industrial food companies started shaving cents per unit by replacing real ingredients with cheaper substitutes. Milk from a local farm made into cheese by people who've been doing it the same way for over a century. Tested before it leaves and transparent enough to let anyone walk in and watch the whole thing happen. That's what real cheese looks like. Here's the rule to take with you. Simple enough to use while you're standing in the dairy aisle. If the ingredient list runs longer than 5 or 6 items, put it back. Real cheese is milk, cultures, salt, and enzymes. That formula hasn't changed in thousands of years. The moment a label starts adding gums, modified starches, whey protein concentrates, emulsifying salts, sodium phosphate, sodium citrate, and a list of additives you'd have to search to identify, you're not reading a cheese label. You're reading the ingredient list of something that borrowed cheese's name and packaging and left behind everything that made it real. 2 out of 3 brands are doing this. Bloomberg lab tests documented it. Class action lawsuits confirmed it. A federal criminal prosecution put it permanently on the public record. Here's the label check to do before your next grocery run. If the front says cheese product, prepared cheese product, or pasteurized processed cheese product, that's already your answer. Then flip it over. Look for sodium phosphate, sodium citrate, modified food starch, milk protein concentrate, or maltodextrin. Finding 2 or more of those together tells you the manufacturer had to break down and rebuild the natural structure of cheese to create what you're buying. Real cheese doesn't need that. The 4 brands at the end of this list prove it doesn't have to be this way. Real cheese made from real milk with a short and honest ingredient list is sitting on the same shelves as everything on the avoid list. Same store, sometimes the same aisle. You just have to know which one to reach for. And now you do. Next time you're at the store, flip the package before it goes in the cart. The honest ones have nothing to hide on that label.